Hi, I'm Rex Black, President of RBCS. Welcome to the RBCS YouTube channel. Hey, I hope you enjoy all these free resources that are available here. And do us one favor. We need to keep the lights on and we need your help to do that. So, when you need testing and quality related services, training, consulting, expert services, you name it, let us be one of the bidders on that next job. We don't expect to get all of your business, but we'd like to get a chance. Thanks and enjoy the shows.
Welcome to this webinar on introducing the ISTQB Agile Syllabus. I am Rex Black, President of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. Our team of international consultants deliver customized training, consulting, and outsourcing services for companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. I'm the author of 12 books on software testing, including a number of books on the ISTQB program. And who knows, maybe an upcoming book describing the ISTQB's Agile Foundation syllabus. We're presenting this webinar in partnership with Software Test Professionals. You can check out their website at softwaretestpro.com. Just got back from the STP conference last night. The conference is winding up today. Any of you who are there listening to this broadcast in your off time, I hope the rest of the conference is going well for you. Attending today's webinar earns PMI PDUs. Thank you, Vicky Sasser, for reviewing this material for PDU status and making valuable suggestions. You'll receive an email telling you how to claim the PDUs if appropriate. Before we start the presentation, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please feel free to submit them throughout the presentation via your webinar interface. But please note that they are answered only at the end, though I will be looking at some of your responses a little differently this time during some of the questions that we're going to talk about. So I will look at some of the things that you're saying to me during the middle of the presentation. But for the general rule, questions will be answered at the end. You do not need to ask for presentation copies. The presentation is already on the web. It's at www.rbcs-us.com. Navigate to the Resources tab in the upper middle of the page. From there, navigate to the Basic Library. You will find the PDF version of the slides at that location. You have been automatically registered just by attending this webinar for a free e-learning drawing, which will happen in the next couple days, so watch your email. If you're having any problems with the webinar, getting access to either audio or visual, I suggest contacting GoToWebinar support. Generally, the problems are either browser incompatibility, so your browser doesn't work with GoToWebinar or doesn't work properly, company firewalls preventing the download of the GoToWebinar software, but of course you wouldn't be hearing me if you had that problem. And audio settings on your PC can sometimes be problematic with the GoToWebinar software, so you might check that as well. Hope you enjoy this free webinar from RBCS. We do these as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company. So today we will talk about the new ISTQB syllabus, and specifically that'll bring us to the topic of what's in it and what are we doing with respect to courses for it and other related topics. So ISTQB support for Agile just generally is something that has been true for a long time. There's been a discussion in both the foundation and the advanced syllabi about Agile methodologies and the need to fit testing within the different methodologies. And that's been there for years. And there's also discussion at the expert level. And the expert test manager, for example, when it came out, it was one of the things that myself, along with my co-authors, made sure to talk about was the influence of life cycle on the way in which software is not just developed but also tested. Now, the idea here with this new syllabus is to extend the foundation to add some complementary material that goes into more detail with respect to testing in an agile environment. So the courses, if you decide to take a course, which of course you don't have to, it's an ISTQB program, you can self prepare for this. But if you do decide to take a course, it'll be 2 days, as opposed to the anywhere from 3 to 5 days that the foundation is typically run in. We usually run our course in a 4-day format, but we also do offer it in 3-day, usually 4. The syllabus, the new Agile Tester extension syllabus was written in mostly in 2013. We're still polishing it now. Tahita Parveen and I are putting the finishing touches on it. We hope to have it released to the general public here in the very near future, sometime in early May. Now, as we were writing the syllabus, one of the things that we were doing was looking at what are the established Agile best practices, what are the best ideas that are out there with respect to Agile development and Agile testing, and also looking at what are established testing best practices regardless of life cycle, and how do those port over, if you will, into an Agile methodology. So, some people act as if Agile came along and changed everything. It really doesn't. It affects everything in testing. It has an effect on the way that you do your testing, but it's still the same best practices apply. We just apply them differently. So let's take a look at what we've got here in the syllabus and look at some sample questions as well. All right, now this is the structure of the ISTQB program, so you can see where the Agile Tester fits in. Let me get the highlighter up here. So here's the Agile Tester. The highlighter does not want to work. Okay, the spotlight. So there's the Agile Tester there. As you can see, planned for 2014. Like I said, should be out here in the next, month or so. There's also another extension planned, which is model-based testing. That's planned for 2015. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, in terms of market demand, Agile Tester is by far the most important. Just to give you an example, we're pre-selling our virtual Agile Tester virtual course, and just within about a week of announcing it and advertising it, we've already got 30 people signed up for it. So there's quite a bit of interest, quite a bit of demand. Now, the advanced fits above this, above the foundation. Agile Tester will not be a prerequisite to take the advanced level. If the prerequisites for the advanced level will still be just the foundation. But there is a possibility that at the advanced level there might also be some Agile extensions that are added there with something that's being discussed now. So then in that case, the Agile Tester extension at the foundation level would be a prerequisite for the extension at the advanced level. And then you see we've got the expert levels here, and we are continuing to roll out that expert level. So that's that's something that continues to progress. Okay, so let me get back to normal mode here in the presentation. So what can you expect to say take away from a Agile Tester certification? What should a person who's got the skills inherent in the Agile Tester Foundation syllabus be able to do? Well, collaboration. Collaboration is a big part of Agile, and so in the syllabus there's a lot of stress on work collaboratively with the rest of the Agile team, and know Agile best practices, Agile principles, be aware of those so that you can actually effectively collaborate. You know what you're doing and how to fit yourself into the context. Be able to apply your existing testing skills, experience, knowledge, best practices in an Agile setting. So know how to take what you already know about testing, test design techniques, risk analysis, and so forth, move that into an Agile environment. Participate in release and iteration planning, figuring out what test strategies you're going to follow throughout each iteration, participating in estimating the testing effort associated with each one of the user stories and other test-related tasks in each iteration, be able to participate effectively in those activities. Be able to apply the techniques that are appropriate to a given situation. So black box testing, white box testing, experience-based testing, be able to apply those techniques where appropriate. Agile puts a great emphasis on automation, test automation, as do other life cycles as well. And in an Agile environment, the tester is expected to be able to participate and contribute to this automation work. So be able to participate in that. Work with business stakeholders to help refine and define the requirements, often referred to as user stories in an Agile environment. Make sure that they're clear to yourself as a tester and to the developers and to the business stakeholders, that you all agree on what they mean, and that there are defined acceptance criteria for the user stories so that you can recognize when a particular piece of code is actually done. And as you generate information, so of course is what we do as testers, share that information effectively and in a timely fashion with other people on the team. So those are the things that you should be able to do. Sorry, I've been dealing with a little Citrix real estate issue here. All right, good. There we are. So what's in the syllabus? So the syllabus has 3 chapters in it, and the first chapter is a general one on Agile software development. So it goes through the basic concepts of software, Agile software development, fundamental ideas, Agile Manifesto, for example, and then different interesting aspects of Agile approaches. And we picked out 3. There are many different Agile approaches out there, different types of Agile. We picked 3 out as sort of examples and to represent some of the different kinds of ways that people go about doing Agile development. So we look at Scrum and Kanban and extreme programming. We had a lot of debate about that. Do we want to go broad or do we want to go deep? Ultimately, we decided, it'd be better to be more in depth and provide some detail on a small sample of approaches rather than try to enumerate every approach that's out there. So we picked those 3 as being, reasonably common, not by any means ubiquitous, but certainly Scrum, Kanban, and XP are things that are in relatively common use, Scrum especially, and Agile practitioners tend to know about them. So we figured it's good that testers be conversant in those. And so that's at a high level. The general approach to writing the syllabus was to start at the highest level and then move down to providing more detail and more depth later. So there is sort of I guess appropriately enough, iterative nature to the material where it gives a very high-level overview, and then as you continue on into chapters 2 and 3, it goes into more detail and things that were introduced earlier. So the second chapter gets into principles, practices, and processes in Agile testing. So now we're going from Agile software development in general to how testing fits into Agile. So there's a section on let's sort of compare and contrast traditional and agile approaches. So traditional approaches being the waterfall, V model approach, and also the iterative approaches such as rational unified process and rapid application development. So those are considered also to be traditional approaches. But some people would say they kind of straddle the middle ground between agile and sequential. So we do that compare and contrast, then move on into status of testing, how test status is reported in agile projects, how testing is managed. And then we look at the role that testers play in an agile team and the skills that they need to have. What kind of skills do you have? How does agile change the skills mix that a tester needs to have? And then finally we get to the most specific of the chapters, the most down to the nitty-gritty, if you will, of the chapters. And you'll see why I say that here in a bit when we go through the learning objectives associated with each chapter. We look at different methods that are used in Agile for testing, application of quality risk analysis to Agile and how test effort is estimated, different techniques that are used in Agile projects, and finally a brief discussion of tools and how Agile makes tools even more important for a tester in an Agile in a project. So as I said, they start at the top level here, in general and broad discussion, move on to focus more on testing, and then get to very specific in that last chapter. So, whoops. So in order to understand that a little bit more, I need to explain something which you might or might not be familiar with, depending on whether you've taken the foundation already and also who you took your foundation course from, assuming that you took one. This might or might not have been explained to you. We explain this in our courses so that people get a better understanding. But what you see defined in the ISTQB syllabi, all of them, are learning objectives, okay? And the learning objectives are at different knowledge levels. And basically these learning objectives and the knowledge levels that they're at are there to say, okay, this is what we expect a person who's got this certificate to know and to be able to do to this depth of knowledge. And the three depths of knowledge are, the basic one is remembering. It's basic recall. Can you remember a fact, remember a technique, remember a definition? And then K2 is being able to actually understand something. You know, obviously you have to be able to remember something to understand it, but just because you remember something doesn't mean you understand it. That's why it's a more sophisticated level of knowledge. I mean, you might, remember. Well, I'm going to give you an example. I remember how to read Cyrillic letters from taking Russian in college, but I don't understand Russian. So, I mean, I can read out the words, but I don't understand what they mean. So I basically have K1 level knowledge of Russian. I remember how to read it, like what the sounds are, but I don't understand what the sounds mean. And then K3 is application, to be able to actually do something. And obviously you would have to remember and understand something to be able to do it, but just because you remember and understand doesn't mean that you can do it. I'll give you an example of that. I understand perfectly well how a piano works. I understand the physics of the strings and how the hammer striking the strings causes them to make sound, and how there's the wood in there, influences the sound. Yeah, totally understand that. Can't play a note. I have K2 knowledge of how a piano works. I do not have K3 knowledge of a piano. I can't play it. Now, at the foundation level, on the exam, 50% of the questions are K1, 35% are K2, and 15% are K3. And what you're going to see here in a minute is how we change the focus in this Agile extension to be much more hands-on and in-depth. I'll show you that here when we get into the exam structure. So if you look at the first bullet there, 40 questions, 65% or more to pass. Each question is worth the same number of points, 2.5 points. Okay, so far, that's exactly like the foundation. But look at Chapter 1, the 13 questions, and notice that more than half of those questions are K2. There's only 5 K1s, and there's a K3 in Chapter 1. Now, moving on to Chapter 2, 12 questions, almost all of which are K2 questions. And then you look at Chapter 3, which has 15 questions, the most questions of all. Half of those questions are K3. And the other half questions are evenly distributed, K1s and K2s. So there's only going to be 10 K1 questions, only 25% as opposed to 50% in the foundation, the basic foundation. And you have 8 K3 questions, so 20% K3 questions. So it's more application and more understanding, more in-depth understanding. So this is a more challenging exam, so people should be ready for that, be prepared for that. The exam will challenge you in ways that the foundation exam really was not as challenging. It's more, recollection, it's memorization. There's less of that here. Now, you might be thinking, okay, great, well, when can I take the exam? The ISTQB actually has 2 exams ready. They're waiting in the wings, waiting for the syllabus to come out. So once the syllabus is released, the ISTQB will be ready to run those. They have the exam, so that's great news. Now let's look at these learning objectives, and what I want to do is go chapter by chapter through the learning objectives and then give you a sample question for each one of these, for one of these learning objectives, just so you get a feel of what the questions might look like. So the first section in Chapter 1 is, as I mentioned, about just what is Agile software development? What are the fundamental ideas? So you have a K1 learning objective here about the Agile Manifesto. So be familiar with what the Agile Manifesto says, what are the just basic concepts of Agile development per the Agile Manifesto, which pretty much sets down what's common across all of the different Agile approaches, and they are quite different. There are a lot of significant differences between the approaches. It seems like what's happening is that organizations are starting to sort of coalesce into some fairly common practices that hybrid across the various different approaches. Pick out the best parts of the different approaches is what we're seeing with our clients. Now, next we have a K2 there. Advantages of the whole team approach. Being able to work effectively, closely, in a collaborative way with developers and business representatives. Taking testing out of the silo and embedding it within the team, the development team. And we'll talk about how you go about preserving independence, organizational structures that can be used to preserve independence a little bit later. And then early and frequent feedback, understanding early and frequent feedback. And of course, this is just Agile applying a fundamental principle of testing that you might remember from the foundation level, which is that early testing and quality assurance activities are very valuable. They save a lot of time and money. So Agile is in many ways an application of that. So then we move on into the aspects of different Agile approaches. So we have a K1 here, different Agile software development approaches. So as I said, it's Kanban, XP, and Scrum are the 3 examples that we're looking at there. And it's just a K1 learning objective. Just be familiar with them. We're not trying to teach you those 3. It's just saying, here three fairly common techniques that you may very well run across in your course of doing Agile testing. And we have the first K3 here, which is actually be able to create a user story, collaborating with development, the business representatives, and if you're in Scrum, a product owner. So that's very important that testers be able to do that. We wanted to make sure that we had a strong emphasis on be able to define requirements collaboratively with business and technical stakeholders. Then we have a K2. It has to do with the use of retrospectives. Retrospectives are a valuable technique in any life cycle, especially in Agile, where they can be done frequently at the end of each iteration. I was just, as I said, at the STP conference and was one of the leaders of a expert roundtable on Agile techniques. And one of the things that we talked about was one company was having trouble getting traction with their retrospectives. It was what the business stakeholder was referring to as the wine and cheese party, which was basically he would show up and listen to the development team whine about things that went wrong and nothing ever changed. And of course, that's exactly the opposite of what you want out of this process. So understand how to participate effectively and how to utilize retrospectives for process improvement. Continuous integration. Continuous integration is something that's very important in Agile development and really is something that has been going on for years. I remember working on working in an environment where we did monthly maintenance releases and code was checked in every day and run. There was a nightly set of regression tests that were run against it. And really looking back at that, so this is like early 1990s, looking back at that, we were already doing a lot of what ultimately would be called Agile development. So these are ideas that have been around a long time. Continuous integration is definitely a best practice. So that's one of the things that we have in the syllabus. And then iteration planning and release planning and how you can participate as a tester, how to add value in those. People will be familiar with that. So here is a sample question. And I'll let you take a look at this, give you a minute, and I'm going to get the Q&A panel up here. You have your answer. Go ahead and submit it to me via the Q&A panel. You were submitting answers. Most of you have it right so far, but just a few people are missing it, though. Trellis is asking, are you still on? I assume you can hear me. All right, so the answer is A. All right, so as I said, a number of you got that right. As a tester, you want to work with the business and technical stakeholders to help them understand what would be testable acceptance criteria. How would we know that something was actually working properly? So Jim asks, do I win a prize? I'm afraid not, Jim. I have no prizes for this part of it, but you are in the drawing for the free learning, so it's possible that you might win one yet. There's at least not on the first question. Yeah, you have to, it's luck of the draw on the e-learning drawing, literally. Okay, so moving on to Chapter 2. Now, notice the first chapter, learning objectives, very high level, very general, with the exception of the K3 one having to do with the testable acceptance criteria. So the first section here talks about what's different in traditional versus agile approaches, right? And again, traditional is sequential. Traditional is iterative life cycles like rational unified process and rapid application development. Agile includes the basically all the different life cycle approaches that call themselves agile. XP, Scrum, Kanban being the three examples that we picked to look at, but Crystal and so forth would also be included in that. So the K2 learning objective here, what are the differences? Compare and contrast agile and non-agile types of projects in terms of what goes on in terms with regard to testing. Now, coding and testing activities integrated in an agile project. So, what's the relationship between development and testing in an agile project? How is that the same? How is it different? And then how do we preserve independence and what kind of organizational options do we have to make sure that we still get the benefits of independent testing in a situation where people are integrated within the Agile team? And should everybody be integrated within the Agile team? The next section has to do with test status reporting. 2 learning objectives here. 1, how do we communicate test results, progress of testing, the quality of the product? What are different options available for us to do that? And then there's how do we evolve tests as iterations go on? How does test automation allow us to manage regression risk and provide information to people about what the level of regression risk is? It's very important in an Agile project because, of course, regression risk is going to be much higher due to the high rate of code churn that can go on. And then finally, roles and skills of a tester in an Agile team. So just a couple K2 learning objectives. What skills do you need to have? What is your role as a tester in an Agile team? And we get into this in more detail in Chapter 3, too. We come back to it. As I said, a recurring theme of the syllabus is to introduce a concept at a high level and then come back to it and add more detail to it as you go along. Okay, so here we have our next example question. So give this one a shot. This is what's called a Roman type question. You're familiar with that because of the Roman numerals. Okay, so we got answers coming in people are finding this one a little more challenging. I'd say most people are getting it right, not everybody. And so the answer is C. So notice that's saying that 2 and 4 are correct in terms of what the tester does, and the rest are incorrect. So let's go through each one of these. A tester does, well, let me just get the highlighter up here so see what I'm addressing. So a tester does contribute to defining the acceptance criteria in the user story, but ultimately the tester is not the one who makes that determination. Ultimately, it is the business stakeholder who's going to make that determination of whether the particular feature is acceptable. Obviously, tester in an Agile team, just like in any team, will design, create, and execute tests. That's a basic tester role. And by the way, you should notice that any of the options that didn't include 2, which would be this guy here, A, you could immediately exclude because that one is an obvious one. Scheduling defect reports for analysis. No, we don't actually schedule them. The defect reports are going to be considered by the whole team, and the whole team is going to figure out what the priority is of working on those. Obviously, the tester contributes to that discussion, but the tester is not directing the developer, hey, you need to go work on that right now. One of the concepts in an Agile team is that the team is self-directing, which means it decides collaboratively on what to do. It does not one person saying you need to do this. Automation of tests, maintaining those automated tests, that's also something that testers do. Now, you might have looked at this and said, oh, well, that's really mostly the developers, right, doing their test-driven development, using tools like JUnit and so forth. Well, no, they do that. That's true, but that doesn't mean that as testers we don't do automation as well. In fact, we do. We're supposed to. And then this one should have been relatively easy to exclude. Improving the program logic by pair programming, that is, of course, a developer activity, and that's something that the developers are working on. Now, I've got a question from Ivana here relevant to this question, which says, does component testing remain the responsibility of the developers? Yes. Creating the unit tests is something that the developers would need to do. They might use a technique like test-driven development, which is discussed in the syllabus, where the tests are written prior to the code, and then the code is written to make the test pass. So that is still something that the developers do. But we as testers also need to be ready to participate in automation of our system level tests. Make sure that we have good regression risk mitigation at multiple levels. And we talk about in the syllabus how to integrate those different levels, those different test levels into Agile, because, in a sequential environment, what happens is the test levels are basically used as gates as the software moves through from development into a testing phase, testing mode, various levels of maturity. In Agile, those levels are not used as gates. The levels are going on in parallel and iteratively. So there's a lot of material in the syllabus that talks about how that should work and what types of tests need to be run at the different levels as part of the different activities. Okay, so most of you did pretty well on that one, but especially given that I'm not sure that any of you have actually read the syllabus yet. So let's see what's next here. Learning objectives for Chapter 3. This is the first half. So notice there's 2 pages of this. Like I said, we're now getting really specific. So here's the different concepts of test-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, and behavior-driven development. That is something that's laid out. Like, okay, these are the basic concepts. Now, they come back to that later and expect people to actually be able to do acceptance test-driven development. That's something that you'll see in a minute here. The test pyramid, this is where we're talking about the different levels, that and the test quadrants, and how those relate to the test levels and the test types, automation. It's all covered there. And then notice here it's got the K3 role of the tester in a Scrum team. So we now are going to, using Scrum as an example, get very specific about the tester's role, whereas before we were talking about it more generally. And we have a section, a very important section on doing quality risk assessment and estimation in the testing, estimation of the test effort as part of release planning and iteration planning. So be able to assess quality risks and be able to estimate your the amount of testing effort required based both on the iteration content, the user stories that are scheduled for this particular iteration, and the level of risk associated with those stories. Oops. Now we have two more sections here, techniques in an Agile project. So be able to gather relevant information for your testing activities. We've got a K3 there. This is important because level of documentation is minimized in Agile. So what do you do in terms of getting appropriate information for your defining your tests and defining the expected results of your tests? What is pass versus fail? Again, coming back to working with business stakeholders on defining acceptable, testable acceptance criteria. So reinforcing that point that was brought up earlier in Chapter 1. As I said, now here's the K3 on acceptance test-driven development. Be able to create test cases using acceptance test-driven development. Pick that as an example. One of the techniques that's out there. Apply black box test design techniques to Agile projects based on a user story to cover both functional and non-functional aspects of the user story. So there's another K3. This is bringing over known testing best practices into Agile, and be able to do exploratory testing, supporting testing. So application of experience-based techniques in Agile. And then finally, a brief section on tools. So just complementing what's in the foundation in Chapter 6, saying, okay, in addition to what was covered in tools in Chapter 6 of the foundation, here's some other things that you need to know. And it's just a basic K1. You're just expected to have basic recollection of them. All right, so I'll give you another sample question here, last of our sample questions. Again, go ahead and submit the answer when you have it. Most of you seem to be getting it. Few people are stumped by it, though. The answer is C. Now, some of you said A, and the problem with A is the statement, eliminate the potential impact. Okay? If you're looking at a risk item, what the programmers are able to influence is not the potential impact. What they're able to influence is the likelihood of a failure. But you're looking at something like system responds too slowly to user input during login, and say that's your risk item. The impact associated with that is a function of how that failure manifests itself and how frequently that poses problems for customers. What it does to the customers. And that's not something that the programmer is going to be able to change. The programmer can change the likelihood of there being a problem. D, we can eliminate because while certainly product owners or business stakeholders should consider rethinking a user story that has too much quality risk associated with it, rejecting it, that's not necessarily a good idea. It might be that this is something that you really, really need to do, and it's risky. That certainly happens. So C is correct. Obviously, this is true in both Agile and non-Agile, that how much testing you need to do is a function of the level of risk. This was something that was stated at the Foundation in Chapter 1, and then reinforced later in Chapter 5. Now, Jonathan says, well, it really should be B and C. That's why I say B for last. I think what's wrong with B, Jonathan, is it's not so much that the Scrum Master can mitigate the quality risk prior to the start of programming. It's that the whole team can work together to try to mitigate the quality risk. But the Scrum Master, him or herself, is not going to take ownership for trying to reduce the level of risk prior to the programming. So how would the whole team do that? Well, through things like working on the user stories to define them in a way that reduces the amount of quality risk. But notice that in that case, it's not the Scrum Master doing it. It's the whole team. It's the developer, the tester, and the business stakeholder for that particular user story. So, this is a matter of reading this carefully and realizing that this is not something that is Scrum Master's role. And Heather says that totally makes sense. Thanks. So, yeah, B is a very plausible distractor. That's the term for something that an option in the ISTQB exams, which is wrong, is a distractor. And the more plausible one or more of the distractors are, the harder the question. Okay. Now Mercedes says, as we say in PMI, what is the best answer? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so who is the target audience? Who do we develop the Agile extension for? Well, people who have worked as testers maybe for a while, maybe for a long while, maybe for years, but they've been working in traditional software development life cycles, and they need to figure out how to transfer that knowledge over into an Agile world. They're starting to work on projects that are using Agile, or maybe their company is discussing using Agile, and they want to get a sense of, okay, what does this mean for me? It's also perfectly suitable for people who are entry level, coming into the testing world, and either they will be working on Agile projects or they want to be working on Agile projects, and they want to position themselves to be able to do that very effectively. And we also wanted to make this suitable for developers. No presuppositions, I guess would be the word, about what the developers would know or how much testing they had done. But developers working in Agile projects who want to have a better understanding of what testing is all about on that project, and maybe how to participate, collaborate more effectively in testing activities themselves, they're also considered potential audiences for this certification. Now, at this point in time, it is required to have the foundation certificate to take the extension, the Agile extension exam and get the certificate. If you think that's a bad rule, and you think that's a rule that we in the ISTQB should change, then sound off about that. Send us some feedback. That's the current approach, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be the approach. So if you think that that's a dumb rule, let us know. Well, the ISTQB does listen to feedback. Now, say, okay, I'm into it. Sounds good. What's next? So, take training if you want. It's optional. You don't have to take training to take the exam, but you can self-study with books and so forth. Read the syllabus. But we do have a training course. We RBCS. We have a training course. It exists. We're, like I said, running a virtual session of that at the end of May, last week of May. 3-day virtual course, 3.5 hours a day, 3 sessions of that. Homework will be done. The exercises will be done as homework after the first and second session, and then debriefed. In other words, the solutions are discussed at the beginning of the second and third sessions. So that's how we do it as a virtual course. As a live, in-person, instructor-led course, it's 2 days. And we're also going to be building out a e-learning for that, which will be something that we expect to have available, July, August type of time frame. I think we'd probably be in a beta mode with that. Our live course, which is, again, either done live in person or via virtual, that's already been submitted for accreditation. It's not yet been accepted for accreditation because the syllabus isn't out, so it's not, the ISTQB is not ready to accept anything for accreditation yet, but we've submitted the course. Now, in terms of what you'll see in a accredited course, you'll have lecture and real-world examples and exercises for all the K-3 learning objectives. So it's going to be very hands-on. The courses will be hands-on. Now, our foundation course has always been hands-on, but I know there are training providers out there that are much more kind of brain cram type of courses. That's not something that's going to pass muster from an accreditation point of view. But the courses will be different, so you want to look carefully at the different training providers and see what they have to offer. K2 learning objectives, lecture, and again real-world examples, and then the K1 learning objectives are just explained in general lecture explanation in a few minutes. So I expect that there will be lots of options here. As I said, the interest has been intense in this. There's clearly a huge amount of pent-up demand. You've got about 300,000 foundation certificates around the world, and a large majority of those folks, when contacted in a survey, we contact all 300,000, we sampled them, a large majority of the foundation certificate holders said, yeah, we're interested in getting a Agile Foundation extensions certificate. So I expect this to be a big deal going forward. Okay, so ISTQB has embraced Agile from the beginning, and now we are expanding our coverage or extending our coverage of Agile through these extension syllabi. Starting off, we've got very short 3 chapters, 27 learning objectives at this foundation level, looking at how we can take the best ideas of testing and apply them within Agile projects. The exam will be harder. As you saw, it's a lot less about just remembering definitions. It's about half of that from the foundation, much more understanding things, being able to do things. So it's a more rigorous, more hands-on type of exam. As far as I know, we, RBCS, are the only training provider currently, and we hope to remain that way for a while, of course, but I realistically expect that there will be quite a few options out there. Now, we do know that some of our partners, most of our licensee partners, are going to be interested in taking up the our course, and we expect that it will be available in various languages fairly soon. I would expect that it will be available in Spanish probably within a month or two. So we expect very rapid take-up of this, and we're all, companies and boards are all positioning themselves. So the ISTQB has an exam, which I'm sure will be available very soon after the syllabus is formally released, which is sometime in the next month. So, exciting program. It's certainly it's a great idea. Its time has arrived, and the ISTQB Foundation's extension syllabus is going to really help expand the idea of what professional testing is in an agile environment. So it's very exciting. It's been exciting to work on it. I was the chair of the working group, and we're getting done here. I'm feeling a great sense of satisfaction in what's been put together. I'm sure when you get a chance